Okay, so here we go. We can share my screen. Let's go into the story, TW. So I'm blocking this because this person wants to be anonymous, and so just to be extra conscious of that, I'm blocking what show it was. I did an episode of Blank when I first moved to Los Angeles at 18. It's a scene where there are a bunch of us girls crammed in a car and we get in a cat fight over a boy. It was so hot inside the car and the other girls got out to take a break. Dan came up to me, crawled the best that he could into the car with a mini fan and pointed it at me and says, "I'm your personal fanboy." Can we all picture it for a second? Let's pause for a second. Let's just picture it. I really don't have patience for specifically powerful men cramming into tight spaces around female employees and hitting on them while on set. Off set too. That happens all the time. Remember the Me Too movement? Men just thinking they can do like that, like get massages from their employees in front of the executives and then later on go, oh, the executives let me do that, so it wasn't that big of a deal. Been happening for far too long. Powerful men specifically, and to be more specific, powerful white men. Not always, but a lot of the time. Getting financially rewarded and protected while they SH and SA their employees. People that are supposed to feel safe. And the power dynamic is so intense that you freeze when it's happening. So picturing Dan Schneider cramming into the back of a car with a little mini fan and saying I'm your personal fanboy to an 18-year-old girl makes me sick to my stomach. What'd you mean by that, Dan? The slap? It was just a joke, like the slap. It was just a joke, like the feet with bananas all over them. Or like a toe stuck in a faucet. Or like BOOB clips on a website for Drake and Josh or iCarly. These are all just jokes. No. So Dan came up to me, crawled the best that he could into the car with a mini fan and pointed at me and says, I'm your personal fanboy. There was something in the way that he said it, we all know, that gave me the creeps. And I just fake laughed and tried to mask as I was well aware of his importance on the show. Sorry, I'm just triggered just because I just know what that means. Where you're freaked out and you fake laugh. And girl, especially, I'm not trying to be gender specific here. I'm just speaking for myself. But as a girl growing up, like you're just taught to smile and not take up space and all these things. So just triggered me. Well aware of his importance on the show. I remember working for 4 days and there was some deal with the contract that I would only be paid for 2 of them. Oh! Sound familiar? Hey, does this sound familiar? Wait, let me make it smaller so you all can see it perfectly. I remember working for 4 days and there was some deal with the contract that I would only be paid for 2 of them. Does it sound familiar to the doc? Which was shitty, but I had the most lines and I knew the other girls were being paid worse. One of which was a rehearsal, which they had kids from St. Jude come to watch. While we waited for our scene, me and the 4 other girls stood with the St. Jude kids and their guardian and watched the opening scene where the main cast came out. When the cast came down, here we go, so trigger warning. When the cast came down, they were dressed basically in pajamas and underwear, and I stood there with those kids and watched Dan flirt and SMACK one of the girls right on her in front of all of us before they started the scene. The others saw it too, and we were mortified. I remember the women in costumes being terrified of something, and they took those Polaroids you guys spoke about. Remember when I would talk about the Polaroids? I'll see someone else remembers the Polaroids too, Dan. Why did they take so many Polaroids of us? Why? They said Dan had to approve. She validated that. Sorry, it's just like really The women also rushed and hit us when one of the girls on the cast came in for a fitting, and I remember it being a weird, toxic environment. They hit us and said not to talk while she was in there. I wonder who it was. I have a feeling about who it was. I remember her being rude and dismissive to the wardrobe department. It just seemed like a really weird environment, sort of lazy and unprofessional. And as I've gone in my career and worked more and more, I look back and it's so clear to me that was not a safe place for children or young women. And I've never been on a set like that since. Look at this. Can we just go back up here for a second? When the cast came down, they were dressed basically in pajamas and underwear. And I stood there with those kids and watched Dan flirt and SMACK one of the girls right on her in front of all of us before they started the scene. Who was that? And see, for the first time now, we have someone coming forward. Dan, I'm talking to you now. We have someone coming forward now, sharing their story, where your on-screen became off-screen, behind the scenes. And this was on a very well-known TV show of yours, Dan. Did you cram back there and said, I'll be your personal fanboy? Did you? To an 18-year-old girl? All the while making the slap? I'm really sorry. You're not sorry enough. How many more allegations are going to come out about you, dude? And then, allegedly, she said that also the rest of them saw you smacking a girl's ASS and having one of them work 4 days and only paying them 2. Yeah, let's do a power to survivors chant for a second so that we can give some applause to the person who came forward. Power to survivors. I mean, that's just like, what? And see, this is the thing that I see a lot in the industry in general, is this whole, oh, this is a joke. This is a joke. This is a joke. This is a joke. If someone's making a certain type of joke over and over again, when do you go, where does this cross over into reality? Shouldn't this be a red flag about the person? Yes, I do think so. I think that it should be a red flag, that it is the responsibility of these networks, these institutions, that when they see this type of behavior being brought to their desk over and over again, especially by one specific type of person that likes to call these types of things crimes even, right? Jokes. Things that they're brooming the audience members into laughing at, into thinking it's normal, hyper-normalizing predatory behavior. This is why I don't like the institutions, because we've learned from Dan Schneider. What did he say? I have a boss that has a boss that has a boss that has a boss that said I could do this. Good. I'm glad you said that, Dan, because that's the problem right there, is that you have people above you that are letting you do something like this. And then those guys at the top are always the same, honestly, that love to say, I'm not held, this is not a liability for me. I had nothing to do with this. I just aired it over and over again and greenlit it and looked at it and allowed it and promoted it. But then when push comes to shove, they're always the ones who are like, oh, no, it was him, it was him, it was him. It was like the Spider-Man meme. It's always everyone else but the people that need to be held accountable. And so when I hear that story, what a brave person to come forward to me and also have me sharing this story. Because when we see someone like Dan Schneider creating content, like the content that we saw, the slap, all of this, this should have been a red flag. Then we read Jeanette McCurdy's book, right? Touching her knee, allegedly. Having her drink, this, that. We're learning how these things cross over into reality. And that's why kind of from the beginning of what we were all talking about, imagination does connect with reality. And we must remember that, because we must also remember predators have imaginations too that they're trying to create or put into reality, make a reality out of what they're imagining. And where do we take a stand on that?